Good morning, everyone. Wow, we have comments and questions already. This is amazing. Um, I am joined this morning by a very special guest, Justin Siegel. Justin, how are you?
Hello. Great. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you again.
You as
Uh,
well. You as well. Where are you tuning in from?
I'm in Houston.
Houston. I don't think we've had any guests on from Houston quite yet. What's it?
Uh,
What's it like?
Houston is great. It's a bit of a different world. Houston is a pretty dispersed city, and there's not a tremendous amount of density here. Not a lot of public transportation, which for a long time seemed like a big negative, but now seems like a bit more of a positive. So,
Hmm.
although the people aren't going out as much, there's still kind of life happening here, and you leave your house, you get in your garage, you go into your little bubble of a car, and you go wherever you're going. And if you squint a little bit, it's like nothing has changed.
Wow, that's so interesting. Why don't you introduce yourself so people can have some context about who you are, what you do, your perspective, and shed some light on the topics we'll cover today.
Sure. Well, I kind of wear two hats. On one hand, I'm the president of Boxer Property. Boxer is a privately owned commercial real estate company. We own and manage office buildings, hotels, some retail properties. We also do some lending. But the majority of our portfolio is office space. We have about 15 million square feet, maybe 140 properties around the country, over 1,000 employees, and we've been in business since my brother Andrew started the company in 1992. Um, we have a history of purchasing distressed assets and turning them around. And typically, what we're doing is taking large spaces and turning them into small spaces to meet gaps in the market. And when we started doing that back in '92, there were not a lot of people doing it. Nowadays, there's many people doing it, and we've had some interesting experiences evolving along the way.
Yeah.
Um, the other part of it is I run a real estate technology company called Stemmons Enterprise, and um, this is an operations platform for real estate companies that allow them to bring information together into one place, to have a common interface for things in their organization, and most importantly, to build and create their own processes that reflect the way they actually want to do business. And so that company spun off as a separate venture about 4 years ago. We work with a number of companies around the country and now around the world. And it's part of kind of what I was doing when I first met you at Realcomm.
Yeah, very cool. So you kind of have this kind of both sides of the coin perspective, both from a property owner and operator, as well as a technology founder.
That's right.
Very
That's
cool.
right. My background was, I mean, I've done a lot of things, but the first real venture that I did was starting a real estate software company in 1997. So I was kind of in the real estate
Hmm.
technology space. I wish I would have thought to call it prop tech or something. I would have been ahead of the game. But we always made information and systems a huge part of what we were doing at Boxer. It's a complicated business. We have a lot of operations. We run a full stack of a vertically integrated business, and we realized at a certain point that we needed systems and information in order to run effectively. And that desire to find something ended up becoming building something, which ended up becoming something that we made available to the larger market. But it's become a fundamental aspect of how we operate our business, is using information and technology for process and decision making.
Yeah, and I've seen it in action. You've shared with me. I'm lucky enough to have seen some of how it actually works and how you're using it. So you built technology that ultimately you knew you needed, and are now offering it out back to the industry, which is super cool.
That's the
Um,
fact.
you you put out an interesting white paper recently. Can you tell us
Hmm.
about that?
Sure. It's been. I'll kind of unburden myself here for a second and say I've been at times acutely frustrated over the last few years as I've seen what's happened in the market for whatever you want to call it, kind of collaborative space, flex space,
Mhm.
co-working. Um, we started this in 1992, where we bought a building that was 110,000 square feet, and we started chopping it up into tiny offices and making it available on a short-term basis. So this is in '92.
Wow.
Our first tenant was 500 square feet on a month-to-month lease, right?
Can we just pause right there? Why did you decide to make that decision? so long ago. And I mean, it seems like it was a really creative decision then.
Yeah. Well, here's what happens. If you think about like kind of the macro sense of how the real estate business works, right? The typical thing that happens is somebody buys a building, and then they wait for a tenant. They want a long-term tenant who will take a big space because the bank that they're going to get the money from to improve the space needs to see good credit there.
Sure.
And the broker who's bringing the tenant wants a big commission. So the number of square feet times the number of years times the percentage is the commission. So the entire market was just not optimized to work with smaller companies. And now in 1992, it was a horrible time in the market. We were in Dallas, and there were empty buildings everywhere. And so the structural aspects of the business meant that everybody was looking for big tenants with credit, and the big tenants with credit were not renting space. However, there were a ton of people that maybe they had lost jobs or displaced or more nimble, and nobody in the market cared about them.
Right.
So we figured, look, we're going to build this space on spec. We're going to put a leasing agent in the building, and we're going to offer people very short-term leases. And we don't really care about their credit because we're not building stuff for them. We're not underwriting them, and we're not paying a big brokerage commission for them. So it was really just more about how do we creatively find a gap in the market and then adjust our operations in the business to be able to do that.
It doesn't for example, sound too dissimilar from even today.
Sure.
Which is so crazy.
That is business, though. In other words, the business is finding something that's out there that isn't being met by other people, and by meeting that need better than others are. And if you can do that, then you're successful. And if you can't, then it's a hobby, or a failed business.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how we started. And, the experience that I had was we were doing this, and then, along came co-working, right? And it sounded great. So we kind of looked at our model and we said, hey, maybe we should get into this too. And, we set up something called WorkStyle, which is kind of our internal brand that's outward facing.
Okay.
But, really it's just us as Boxer. And what we saw was these business models were coming up that just didn't make sense to us. Like there's no reason we couldn't have been a WeWork or a Convene or whatever. We run hotels and restaurants and construction, and
right. we that hospitality element into a workplace environment.
Yeah, I mean, I may not be so cool, but I know how to hire someone who's cool. We could have got someone with long hair walking around and talking about quasi mystical nonsense in the workplace, but the business models didn't work for us, and we watched these companies go up and up and up, and we couldn't figure out why is it that people think this is going to work. Why would somebody pay so much for somebody to come in and do something that was full of conflicts and the numbers weren't working? And so what we saw were everybody was recognizing that there was a need in the marketplace for smaller users and kind of more dynamic and flexibility and so forth. And what most landlords did was they went out and they hired somebody effectively, or they brought in somebody like an intermediary. Right. This is like, I'm going to keep saying WeWork because they're so easy to be a punching bag right now, but yeah. I mean also many other types of companies. The Convene, Notel, Regus, and what they were doing was they were taking a big block of space and giving it to somebody on a wholesale basis and having that person be the retailer. And then that person or that company would break it into smaller pieces and, have memberships and provide food and all these kinds of things. But it just didn't make sense to me. The numbers didn't bear up. Like landlords were coming in and getting into a situation that was full of conflicts. Okay, for example, let's say you lease to WeWork and now they have someone who's in there who's doing really well and wants to grow. WeWork doesn't want to let them grow into a traditional space in the building. They want to let them grow within WeWork. So, or let's say you have a big tenant in the building and WeWork has some great coffee bar and conference facilities and everything. As the landlord, you can't just let your large tenant use those amenities because right. You have an intermediary in there, right? So, I think that what we saw happening was people were seduced by this kind of concept of, oh, these people, these types of operators know the magic secret, and the real estate landlords and traditional management companies couldn't imagine themselves doing it. And we said, look, we're going to do it ourselves. It makes more sense that way.
Right.
We eliminate the extra mouth to feed. And this was what the paper was all about, was some little bit of a victory lap. In other words, we saying, hey, this is what we were doing. This is why we did it. This is why we think this other didn't work. And most important, here's how we actually got it done. And I think that was the big aha moment for me when we looked at this.
So cool. I think it's so cool, Justin. Like you are one of the few, out there coming from the landlord perspective that is really open and always willing to kind of share successes and wins and hopefully like help the rest of your colleagues kind of see the light, if you will, help them learn what you've learned without having to struggle through, trying it out themselves. So I think that's really cool. And it's just it's not something you come across, that mindset too much in our industry. And it's so interesting, I think, this moment right now, because I've expected there to be so much more sharing during this time amongst the landlord community, because it's kind of this whirlwind, unprecedented moment where, commercial real estate will endure. This is not a, here today, gone tomorrow type of industry. Like, we'll be here, but you don't see as much of the kind of sharing of success and wins and best practices as we're all kind of figuring it out and taking chances to see what we can make happen, right? So I applaud you for that. Thank you for sharing. I'll share in the comments this white paper so you guys watching can all check it out. And then Justin, any other resources or articles, or you can go ahead and share with in the comments after our stream. But I do want to talk a little bit about some of these cool images and graphics that you put together so people can visualize. And for those of you who are following, this is going to be the white paper that we'll share.
It's interesting because when we look at the pictures that we took before COVID of our collaborative spaces, which we now have rebranded as flexible spaces. We never said co-working. We used to say collaborative. Now we've moved on to flexible. But most of the pictures are of the common areas because that's kind of they're photogenic. But the reality is that most of the space is individual offices, and that was always our approach. Was that we looked very carefully at the ratio of big open common space to people's individual offices, and we just found that going too much for the open space didn't really work unless you're in a ultra high dense market like New York or downtown San Francisco or something. So this was one of the pictures I found that actually gave a sense of the interplay between the shared spaces, which this is just a mini little lounge in the corner somewhere, and the fact that everybody gets their individual private offices.
Which bodes well for, life now and hopefully in the next few months.
Thank God I couldn't make it work with hot desks and that memberships. Like it never made sense to me. The economics didn't make sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel similarly. And I think that, there's a lot of power in just the media and putting a beautiful face on a space and an idea of kind of community and coming together and all of that, because co-working is nothing new. It's been around for a very long time, right? So we've just kind of seen this uptick and very kind of trendy nature of how it's manifested in the last, 5-6 years, maybe that.
What I'm happy about is that I no longer have to compete with people whose business models don't make sense. It's not.
They'll always be around, Justin. They'll always be around.
They'll always be around. They'll always be around. No, don't get me wrong. They'll always be around. But if you see kind of what the economics look like for companies like WeWork and others had an unnatural boost because the landlords would give them a tremendous amount of upfront free rent and improvement allowances that didn't necessarily have to go into allowances. So you have someone who's losing money, whose product you have to compete with. But if I'm trying to make money and they're okay losing money, then that's difficult to compete in the marketplace with someone whose fundamental economics aren't making sense. The number of those things that do make sense will be much smaller than the ones that people were expecting or that we were dealing with recently. And I would say that, of course, there'll always be co-working. It's great. I just think that the costs will kind of bear out in a way where it's easier to have a real product competing against it than just dealing with somebody who's literally burning money. I think I lost your audio. Can you hear me?
Are you back?
Yes, now I got you.
Okay. Let's pull up some of these cool graphics that you have shared with me, and I want to share them with others. You'll tell me if there's one in particular that you want to start with, but I think these were a couple of the first.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, and I kind of have to walk you through this a little bit, but
okay.
What we do is we have flexible space that we make available to people on very short-term deals, right? So that's kind of the individual users. The yellow here is there, and this is why it has to be the landlord or the property manager who's administering the flexible space, because you can pull this off where you can't if it's a tenant who's doing it, and cutting it into retail. So those individual users are looking at that floor and going, great, I can take one office or two offices. I can have it for a month or a year or whatever. In the meantime, you've got larger tenants that are in blue there. Those are traditional tenants in the property. And they're looking at that and going, hey, that's my overflow space. If I get busy, I can, if I need more space, I can just roll in. And sometimes we put it in the lease, is we give them the right, essentially the right to dislocate the smaller users. And normally we have another place for them to go. So we can clear out those yellow floors in 30 days. So if we have a
configuration essentially of your building stack as it relates to catering to tenants who want and are asking for a shorter term, more flexible, maybe even like more highly amenitized space, then hey, I'll take a 10-year lease and build it out myself. And
that's right. But think of it as we call it a covered, they have a concept of a covered land play in real estate, right? Where you have something on there that's generating revenue, but in the future you're going to tear it down and build something new. This is like a covered spec play. Is we've just built a spec space and we're generating revenue on it in the short term, but it's a spec space that's available for a larger tenant to just take, right? So it could be the blue is a larger tenant. So if we go, let's say we're going to rent 2 floors to someone and say, look, you have immediate expansion into a whole additional floor anytime you want it. And in the meantime, it's not empty. We're collecting revenue on it, right? Yeah. And then the green ones are some external person. Maybe it's a law firm that just got a big, huge, class action case, and they need to, they need a floor immediately. Is we continue to market the space that is being used by smaller short-term people. We continue to market it on a long-term basis as ready-to-go space that we can deliver in 30 days. Where if you're a tenant looking for a full floor somewhere and you say, I want a full floor that's fully built out that I can look at and see, that I know what it's going to look like, and I want to be able to move in 30 days, that doesn't exist usually. So because the landlord or the property manager is executing on this strategy, then we can use that same space in 3 ways instead of just one. And it's if you think about kind of the difference between building out a spec space or leasing 2 floors to a tenant who may not know that there's room to expand in the building and may get stuck without additional flexible expansion space, this is a totally different approach, and it's been really helpful for us. But you just can't do it if that yellow floor is leased to WeWork, for example.
Right. Do you think that the more corporate tenants, in office buildings are, I mean, I know there's a kind of overall consensus of, downsizing, making the most of space that is necessary for employees that are going to be coming back into the office, kind of trickling in over however length, whatever length of time. Do you think that they are considering things like this, asking for things like this more and more because they kind of have to? Are they getting creative with how they're thinking about their office strategy? Or are a lot of people trying to kind of maintain maybe what we've had and kind of think about getting back to the original model?
Yeah, maintaining is gone. In other words, everybody is aware of the need to change. I think there's several different factors that I'll unpack for a second in the question that you're asking.
Sure.
One is overall a de-densification. So, we understand now that 120 feet per person is not going to work for the foreseeable future based on this pandemic that we've just been through. So, companies will need more space between people. And I've looked at a deck from WeWork that shows how they're going to, answer this is basically like, we're just going to have half the people, so this is a reality for employers. Now, people who have large spaces in ultra dense, central business district type things are definitely looking to go into more of a hub and spoke model. And, instead of having a full floor in Manhattan or 5 floors in Manhattan, you might have one in New Jersey, one in Westchester, one in Connecticut, and one in Long Island. And, you have a much smaller office now in the city, but it gives you resiliency and distribution. People still have a place to go, but they don't have to go through the subway or the PATH train, up the elevator, so forth. So I think within the office, it's de-densification. The offices themselves are going to be distributed and closer to where people live and in less dense places. And then the last thing that is kind of most direct to your question is, as somebody rents a space, they understand that there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty right now, and there's a very high focus on preserving capital. So if you need, you might normally rent 20,000 feet, right? But you only really need 12 right now. You don't want to rent those extra 8. So if you rent 12 in a building where you have the right to expand on 30-day notice into additional space as you need it, then that flexibility commands a premium right now.
I'm going to put this one up there as we're chatting about this.
Yeah, no, this is where technology makes a difference, right? So think about this. This is a little brain teaser thing where they show one triangle and then they go, how many different triangles are within this, right? And then you take a floor and you say, well, how many spaces could this be cut into? And what happens in a traditional environment is the broker needs to kind of understand, well, we could cut this up. We could, so one broker calls another broker and they say, what do you have? And they kind of know, and they could tell you, well, we could subdivide this, we could subdivide that. In a world where people are searching online, they type in their search parameters. They see, I need this many offices, or I need between X square feet and Y square feet. And so what we do is we take that space and we bust it out into a number of different permutations where you say, well, it could be this space, it could be this space, it could be this space. And we call that synthetic spaces. Those synthetic spaces are captured in our database, and they're syndicated to the marketplace as if each one is its own unique space. So although we may have one floor, we're expressing it many, many different ways. And in a certain piece of that floor may be involved in Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, and Unit 4, because we recognize that online searches are a reality right now. And if you're, if it's a 30,000 square foot floor and somebody needs 12,000 square feet, they're not going to look at it, even if it's subdivisible into 12. So, when you take this across, 140 properties with 12,000 customers as we have, there needs to be a system to do this. We can't rely on individual leasing agents or brokers to be able to keep track of all this. So we use systems and technology to properly market our spaces.
I think it's a beautiful time for people to consider their tech stack, both as many people, are not going to be going back to the office anytime soon. So both in and out of the office. And we'll talk a little bit about more of that, creating that kind of tech stack and ecosystem later on with our guest from Join. But this is a really kind of nice parlay into that, if you will. And there's another chart that I think it's this sensitivity analysis. Will you be willing to chat about that a little bit?
Sure. It's not my work, but we got a nice place on it. So yeah, go for it. So this was something that was forwarded to me that came from JLL very recently, and they did an analysis of co-working. Now, again, the name co-working is somewhat of a interesting concept because it could mean a lot of things, but whatever it means in this case, JLL decided that Boxer was the largest low risk provider of this, and I was very proud of that because I understood a long time ago that this wouldn't work for us if we were just doing it for other people with a tiny piece of their property. We would be just like some of the other yellow and red people on there. But if we were doing it ourselves, then we had a tremendously stable footprint and model and so forth. So the numbers I would say are clearly off. I would put us at higher than 2 million square feet of this type of space. And we don't have anything in San Diego anymore because we sold that building a while ago. So there's clearly some data issues here. But what I can tell you is that by learning how to do this ourselves, by learning how to effectively be the operator of the flexible spaces, we have been profitable the whole time, and we've been able to add significant value to the building without some false sense of being isolated from risk. And this is what a lot of landlords are realizing right now is they thought, look, I can have somebody else do this. I'll give these guys some tenant improvement. I'll give them a cut on the rent, and they will figure it out, and I will not have the risk. And in fact, they still do have the risk because a ton of these people who are tenants, as it relates to the asset owner, are not paying rent right now. And there's legal issues, and there's credit issues, and there's kind of operational issues. Like, what do you do if your group that you lease to isn't operating anymore, but you've still got their customers coming into your building? Very challenging situation. So glad that our model has shown to be successful, and I have some very specific feelings as to why people didn't do this.
Share with us.
What's that?
Tell us, what are your feelings?
I think that people were afraid. In other words, there's new skills that you have to learn to do this that are not part of the normal role of a property manager.
Yeah.
You're dealing with Wi-Fi for customers. You're dealing with cleaning up the refrigerator. You're dealing with furniture and art, and kind of breaking ties between people if they're not getting along. What do you do if someone's being messy in the break room? And so what happened was the ability for people to do these things themselves required them to learn new skills. And frankly, people were too stuck in their grooves. So they engaged in what sounded reasonable. You kind of get these people on panels and they go, well, we decided that we would sit back and watch and learn, and we felt that it's a different kind of activity, and it's and really, I think there was a lot of fear of, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm going to fail. I'm going to look stupid in front of, like job security, fear of exposure, fear of failure. I put in my white paper a book that I found on Amazon called Willful Blindness. And it was just kind of saying, like, why do people decide to pretend that something is reality? We turn a blind eye in order to feel safe, to avoid conflict, to reduce anxiety, and to protect prestige. And I think this fear of failure and fear of getting it wrong led people to, trust hucksters, frankly, and slick presentations that didn't actually result in good business. And so, what we did is we went the other way and we said, look, we can learn this stuff. We can learn it. If anyone can learn it, we can learn it. And the way we learned it was by having proper systems and proper information. And so this is kind of my feeling about how important understanding information, being able to build business processes, being able to build workflows, being able to have a way of creating a process and rolling it out to your people and having it be agile and durable and all that stuff leads to real opportunities that you couldn't otherwise get. And, it's, in my opinion, the whole CRE, prop tech thing, this is its time. this is the time for companies to
That's
realize.
what I was going to ask, because it's a very interesting moment, not just for reconsidering a workplace model or flexible space or co-working, or do I do it myself as a landlord, or do I partner with somebody? It's a whole mindset shift, and that I think we've been, at least in my job, I've been pushing for and advocating for, and people throughout the industry like yourself have been in this mindset for a long time, but I think we've been kind of waiting for the industry to come to the table and use technology as the toolbox we know it can be to power all of the functions that we want to accomplish as humans and professionals. And so what do you think is going to happen now? I mean, we see a lot of people who are like, we had a good run, but, we'll just kind of sit back and enjoy the fruits of our labor and, maybe retire a little bit early. But then there's a lot of people, across generations, a lot of people who are now, looking to technology, looking to YouTube University even to learn new skills, become savvy in basic things that help them just do their job while we're working from home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not coming to the table anymore. It's coming to the life raft. Like if you are running a real estate business, a few years ago, it was kind of an opportunity.
Yeah.
We can do more. We can add additional opportunities if we embrace some of these new approaches and so forth. I think that it would have gotten here inevitably, but this whole COVID thing got us here much faster. Now you have to, and if you don't, you're dead. That's it. Like, especially in kind of denser urban areas, but as a real estate company, and frankly as any company right now, we've all at the very same time experienced two major dislocating events. One is the modality of our working has changed in the sense that we're now working in a distributed way where information has to flow through channels. It's not, you can't walk down the hall, you can't grab something from somebody, and we are all immediately massively more sensitive to costs.
Yeah.
So inefficiencies, errors that are unforced, things that are done that don't need to be done or done in ways that are not effective are just absolutely. It's like trying to swim with weights attached to your ankles. And I think companies are realizing that, and frankly, the companies that don't realize that will go out of business or see their best people wander away. And unless they have some structurally defensible position, like they're sitting on a piece of land that will always be a valuable commodity, I think you'll see some turmoil. And this is what we saw in the internet, in the early 2000s, was like, AOL and Yahoo, and you don't want to be Yahoo when Google comes along. You don't want to be Kmart when Target comes along, and I mean, it goes on and on. Maybe I shouldn't talk about retail right now because that's a bummer too. But
no, I mean, and I think with everything that happens, and is happening around us, we both can sit here and with confidence say that there will be a tremendous opportunity that comes out on the other side, right? We know that with every kind of downturn or economic crisis or tragedy, there is always innovation. People get creative. As humans, we're really resilient. So we know that there will be kind of, rebirth, if you will, after all of this is, starting to be resolved and hopefully, start to be safe to come back to work and come together, and collaborate. But in the meantime, yes, technology is, thank God we're in 2020 and we have all of these tools at our disposal to transact and do work and communicate and do cool live stream chats and hang out, Houston to New York, no problem. And wherever everybody's tuning in from, let us know where you guys are in the comments if you'd like. I also want to quickly say, if anybody has questions for Justin, let us know. We'll be taking some questions towards the end of this stream.
I have some questions that I often ask people as kind of a litmus test to kind of see where they are. So let's say, just for the sake of the conversation, we're out at a restaurant or a bar or cocktail party or by the pool somewhere, and I'm talking to somebody in real estate. I'll say something like, "Can I see your property list?" And if that person can't say yes right then and there, there's a very fundamental problem, right? I mean, just imagine, if it was something in the consumer world and I said something like, "Hey, Mariel, are there any good restaurants around here?" Or are there any movies playing? Or, it's like, of course, let me show you right here. If you don't have your property list in your pocket at all times, that's already the first step, and you're like into the river. Because it means you have to call somebody, and it means that everybody has to call someone, and there's no common list of properties, which means that you can't normalize your processes and information across your properties through every department. And that means that you can't really operate your business in an analytical way, right? So it's kind of, you keep pulling on the thread and you say, well, if we don't have a common tag, this is another thing that that I often ask people is, can I see your taxonomy? Do you have a taxonomy for your business? And if they don't know what the word means, that means that they're not data rich. If they know what it means, but they don't really have an answer, it means that they haven't done the fundamental work that will allow them to succeed. And, once you have that data platform in place, you can do some amazing things. We use artificial intelligence in a lot of different places in our business. We're able to have things trigger automatically to find it. We're exception based. So if the data is telling us that something is out of whack, the system will, and this is the Stemmons enterprise system, the system will catch that and notify somebody.
Just so you guys know, because I've seen this technology in action, just even from, I don't know if this specifically, let's see. Is this a Stemmons interface?
That is that. No, I'll tell you what that is. This gets back to the kind of thing about running collaborative space. Is how do you train a bunch of property managers to know exactly what to do when you ask them to go check on the flexible space, right? So what this is it's just there's a mobile version of the product, and you can put whatever checklists in it you want. So we configured a checklist for all the things that we look at, and the managers get a case on a regular basis that says, please go look at this, and I'm trying to read the details here, but like they check the Wi-Fi signal strength. They look at, there's video arcade machines, are they clean? Do they work? Is the art in the right place? Is the sink clean? Is there coffee? Are there fingerprints on the glass doors? Does anybody have child's toys that shouldn't be there? That it's not a playground. So what we've done here is we've taken something and said, look, we have a standard and we want to push that to people. And by the way, if something new comes along, like we need to have hand sanitizers there, we can add that to the list. And then immediately the next time every manager inspects the work style space, they're going to be also looking for hand sanitizer. No training, no reminding, no jumping on people, no having to run around for me. And that's the kind of world you can be in if you have good information.
Right. And transparency. So I remember you showing me, just on your phone, the app, you had full transparency into your property list. You can go into each property, see, granular information about the process, the protocol, the employees, sometimes even, I think you had shown me like uniforms, what they wear, right down to very, very specific details, so that everything is at kind of the touch of the of your finger on your phone to find information. Right. And I think, you can talk to us a little bit about the AI and how you guys are using it, because I think people are super interested. But that's a whole rabbit hole conversation in and of itself that we have had before. But we'll share with people in a few weeks on another episode.
Well, I'll say this: I'm a data first kind of guy, because I realize that if you have good information, you can use it as a springboard to do many things. So being able to find things, being able to assign things, having visibility, having accountability, but also being able to use algorithms or more complicated things like neural nets. But what we want to do is be able to activate these things where and when we want to. So one interesting example is you say to somebody, do you have a safety committee? And most everybody does. And then you go, great. How would somebody know who's on it? And it's always like, well, I'd have to ask. We have to find it's in a Outlook list somewhere, like, and you say, well, how many times have they met? What's the agenda of their meetings? What incident report files are they looking at? And these things sound very basic, but our insurance is 1/5 of what everybody else is paying for the same insurance. And it's because we have fewer incidents and we have fewer problems. And it's not because we run around telling everybody safety is our first priority. It's because we have an actual functioning safety committee that looks at incident reports, that develops training, that sends the training out to the people in the right roles. And it's all because we have control of our information and our data.
Right.
And I think, this is one, I'll just say this as an open challenge to any real estate company out there, is I believe that we have better data about our operations than anybody else in any company, other than ones that are using our product. And if you believe, like I do, that that's important, then it goes a long way. And another thing we've been able to do, which has been really interesting, we started 9 years ago being a global company. So we opened an office in India, and we started having parts of our work happen there. And because we have that accountability and visibility, we've been able to disaggregate work product and say certain things are going to happen in the middle of the night in a market where the labor rates are much lower. We've got about 300 people there, and they interact on a regular basis through all the work streams in our organization. The cost savings are tremendous, but it also allows us to do things we couldn't do. We've got assistant property managers doing the variance reports overnight and coding invoices and putting together construction draw packages and those kinds of things. Without a framework or a system and good information to do that, we wouldn't be able to execute on that. So the benefits of having a good system and good data show up all over the place. We can run our work style thing. We can have lower insurance costs. We can operate in India. And I have time to do things like this instead of having to run around to every building trying to make sure that there's not some problem that no one's seen.
Right, and constantly updating information as that building is operating, And I think it's also cool because you have this foundation of data and insight and transparency and accountability, you get to be creative with how to use that data, right? It's not just, hey, let me have this for the day-to-day functions and make sure, I can do my job. But I also, can now get creative with seeing things in real time, having that transparency, and maybe trying to identify some potential outcomes, right? Through, again, we won't get too far into neural networks and AI because I think it's a pretty intricate conversation that will take a little bit more of explaining and hand-holding. I know it did when you first kind of shared with me a little bit, but it's a worthy conversation. But so, yeah, the fact that it alleviates you from the day-to-day kind of painstaking process of gathering information in traditionally very fragmented way, right, across the portfolio. Each building is so unique and so different in its operations and its location and all of that. So I think that's really cool and just necessary.
People sometimes ask me if I'm like, what do I do? What do you do? What's your creative outlet? And I say it's work. I do other stuff too, but actually, I have something here on my desk. We've been doing all these Zoom calls, right? And I have a problem. Anybody who knows me knows I'm always carrying around these white cards, right? And I can't help myself from drawing pictures. I'm sure I've done it with you before.
I don't think so. We've just had our other mediums together.
It's because we met at a bar. That's why.
At the end of the Realcomm conference last
That's right.
year. Yeah.
But so when these Zoom calls are happening, I'm always doodling, and I'll share with the audience these are some of the doodles that, like, my I can't stop my brain from going, right. So I'm drawing all these pictures all the time, but it's how I feel about the business too. It's like I'm looking at it and I'm seeing all the connections and the things that rely on each other, and the opportunities to tune things up. And when it's all operating in concert, it does feel like there's a symphony that's been written.
Oh my God! I can't even express the emotion of connecting to what you're saying so much. I love it.
Well, because
it's such a unique experience to have and feel about your work, and the fact that it can be creative and exciting and all of those things. That's amazing.
It's great. It's great to see things that we've come up with have impacts. And we started doing something a long time ago called radical openness, and I think you kind of touched on this a little bit about sharing. I was going to these. My feeling is that the commercial real estate technology community is very open and very into sharing and helping each other.
Yeah, because that's technology in general. And I think that's the way that the world really works and wants to keep working today.
Yes. Now listen, if I were a commissioned real estate broker, I may want to keep my stuff close to the chest. But
totally.
So we started doing tours of our property, and we just said, come in. People come in and we give them a list of meetings that are going on. They can walk around anywhere in the building. They can talk to anybody. I mean, in our offices, they can talk to anybody. They can ask to see what's on the screen. What are you working on? They can wander into a meeting and just audit it, and see what. And these are people that you would think of as our competitors, but we realize that by being open and by sharing and by being part of a community, we end up helping people, and we end up learning a tremendous amount as well. And it's pretty rare that we're going after it might be like one building that we're both going after. We're not going to show our offer strategy, but generally speaking, the openness has been tremendously helpful for us, and we've learned a lot from other people in the market. So if there are people who want to kind of see what we're doing, now it's turned into virtual tours. Yeah. So we're setting up virtual tours where you talk to this person, this person, this person. You can see what's on their screen. They'll walk you through what they do during the day. And by being open like that, people have opened their doors to us as well. And we've learned a lot from the community.
That's amazing. I find the most, those aha moments that are like at a DisruptCRE conference when I have a panel of landlord perspectives and everybody sharing out loud best practices. And I don't think people realize how magical that is, how rare that happens. Mm-hmm. And so when it happens, I light up, but those are special moments. And I do think that a lot of it will come more and more through technology and sharing the best practices, because it's a tremendous responsibility in this industry to do what you do. And, you've been able to be really creative and follow your instincts even kind of before people are thinking about some of these core principles, which is what makes you really unique. But everybody brings something to the table. Everyone has an experience. I mean, right now we're all having an incredibly unique experience, very specific to wherever we are, whatever we're doing, however our job has changed. And so I think a lot of times, at least I feel like this from an outsider looking in to what you guys do, there's really this kind of responsibility in sharing for the sake of kind of the public, right? To feel comfortable in buildings, to feel safe and excited to be in a physical place, which,
Yeah, well, this is your being jazzed on that kind of stuff is part of the part of the reason I met you in the first place. I don't think I ever described it this way to you, but now that you're mentioning it, we were in a bar after a Realcomm conference, and you're kind of in the bar and you've talked to whoever you're talking to for a while, and then it's time to kind of circulate. And I'm like, who's that woman over there who looks like she's having so much fun and she's talking to a whole bunch of people? It looked like you were having the fun conversations, or where's the after party going to be? And so I kind of moseyed over and interposed myself into the conversation, and the conversation was about some aspect of real estate technology and process automation or something like that. And I was like, I have found my people. It's fun and instructive. Yeah.
No, and that's totally how I felt meeting you. And then, there is a conversation that I've never published that Justin and I had. Maybe it's an opportunity to publish. I never published any of those podcast episodes, but we had a really, really cool chat where I learned just a little bit more about how your brain works. And it's so, so, so interesting. And I think one of the reasons that I was excited to have you on is because I think that the way that you think about your strategy is really exceptional. And I've seen a lot of the way you talk about approaching your portfolio as a landlord. Man, years ago when you were first just getting started, it's come so much full circle. And it's kind of laid the foundation ultimately, like I said, for you to be creative and think about what else is possible. And that's such a luxury. I mean, I think that so many of your colleagues have over the last 6 years struggled with, do I even need technology? And it's not just about the technology, it's all about the perspective. Am I willing to be creative beyond the traditional landscape of what my business model is and what my investment strategy is and what this building traditionally functions as? And so if we can expand that mindset, it really isn't about the technology. The technology is a function of what we want to accomplish, and it's that tool. It's an extension of us, hopefully. But at the end of the day, there's a whole perspective that's about to be blown open wide. And I hope there's more of us and people who can be excited, because I do feel like there will be kind of a lot of creativity to come out. And so I want to ask, I actually have questions. I don't know if anybody else has questions. Let us know, because we've got just a few more minutes with Justin before we invite our next guest up. But I want to hear what you are optimistic about for the future. A big reason that I'm hosting this show is to kind of help people feel and attach to some of the things that maybe will come that, you know, either we haven't thought about, or maybe there's something that you were excited before all of this happened to see manifest or mature in the market that maybe it's relevant now, maybe it's, you know, not. But what else is exciting for you kind of moving forward into this new world?
Well, I think first of all, I'll say this: I've had hundreds of meetings over the last 4 years with people, you know, in positions of decision-making authority in real estate companies, and I can tell you that there's a wide range of experiences that I've had, you know, and there are some people where you walk in and you start talking to them and you know immediately that you're on the same wavelength, like they get it.
Yeah.
And then there's a significant number of people where I would walk in and start talking about how important it is to have good information and good process and be able to have accountability and all those things. And I can just see the eyes glazing over and rolling back. And I just think, you know, I shouldn't have even started this conversation. You know, like I shouldn't be here. This person isn't ready.
Yeah.
That is changing like crazy. Now, the people who are on this stream, the people who are listening, you know, are people who are by definition, they know who you are and they're interested in this kind of stuff. This is our time, right? This is the dawning of the age of good information and technology in real estate, because to the extent that it was important and interesting before,
Yeah.
it is massively, you know,
necessary. It's not optional,
yeah.
right? We have to. And I think it'll be interesting to see how like municipalities play into governing, you know, physical spaces, if there are any sort of like standards or, you know, kind of public safety initiatives that come into play with this kind of, I don't know what you think about that.
Well, whatever, in other words, there's things that you must do, and there's things that you should do,
Mm-hmm.
and there's things that make you special, right? So that's always been the case. OSHA has always been around telling us that you must do certain things, and there's you know, things that we should do for our teams, and then there's things that we can do that make us special. That segmentation will continue to be there as municipalities change their, and you know, you have to have 18 inches between the light switch and the door frame. Like, we're used to this. So whatever it is that comes, the question is how elegantly can we adapt our processes to do these things, and then not only how easily can we do the things we have to do, but are we doing the things we should do, and then are we going the extra mile to do things that make us special? And you know, if you think about the growing up and moving from being a child to being an adult, you know, and you have kind of in the beginning you're a kid, then you're a teenager, then you're a young adult, eventually, and not everybody is at that point, but you know, I'm understanding it myself, is there's a time where you become the adult generation and your parents are actually like the elderly generation, and now, you know, your generation is making decisions about, you know, things like financial stuff or where they're going to live, or you know, this is that process for people who care about technology and systems and data, and innovation in real estate. You know, we're the adults now, and companies that try to ignore that will just become irrelevant. So if you're someone who's on this call, I would say, I mean, listen, nobody likes COVID. Horrible experience across the board. We would take it back in a second if we could, but you have now been catapulted into the limelight, into the mainframe, and it's time for us, people who feel this way about these things, to exert our influence, make decisions, and save and improve the companies that we're working with.
It's heavy. It's heavy, but it is, I think it's exciting. Like I said, it's not just tackling kind of the issues that we're facing right now today, but it's also kind of ushering in this new future of possibilities. And I think we've seen a lot of major industry disruptors born out of downturns, born out of moments when things aren't clear and people are struggling. And so I think that there's a lot of interesting things to come. I think it's likely we'll have you back in a few weeks, Justin, so we can talk about some of the more like technical side of things and let people ask us some questions about AI, because I truly haven't heard too many people in our industry or others kind of see things the way that you do. So
yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that. Coming from you, it means a lot.
It's true. I tell you that every time we speak, because it really is true. And I feel that a lot. And so for those of you who are watching, thank you so much. I love seeing where all of you guys are from. Yes, we will make the slides available through Justin's white paper. We'll share some resources in the comments. And you can find him on Boxer Properties and Stemmons. We've been tagging him and his companies in all the social media. So Justin, thank you. We will talk to you again soon, and happy Friday.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Bye, everybody.
All right. So next up, we have Charles Stuckey. Here he comes. There he is. Charles, hello. Can you hear us? Are you with us? Can you hear us? Oh, we can't hear you. Are you on mute? Oh, hello? There you are. Oh, let's see. You can hear me, but I can't hear you. Can you guys out there hear Charles? I don't think we can. We can't hear you. But that's okay. I'm going to start off by playing a little video that we did with Charles and Join. So Charles is the CMO of Join Digital. They're actually right now offering a really fantastic service out to their clients, the commercial real estate industry, tenants of those commercial buildings, for it's called Extended Workplaces. Actually, I'm just going to play the video. Charles, I'm going to hide you for 1 second while we play this video. Let's see. All right, so for those of you who may be struggling with VPN services at home, that was all about that offer, and Charles will tell us a little bit more about it. If we can hear him, Charles, can we hear you? Let's see. No, we can't hear you quite yet. Maybe you can just try to rejoin us. Oh, he's talking to us. We can't hear him. He's going to try to rejoin. In the meantime, I'll tell you guys a little bit about Join, because we've worked with them a lot over the years. They are providing services to commercial Class A office buildings, both from a connectivity and cybersecurity standpoint. So the idea is to help tenants feel really, really secure in their buildings as they're accessing their files, doing their work. And so it's super interesting time kind of working from home and not knowing how secure your service, your connectivity is, whether it's accessing kind of your work platforms or just generally whatever it happens to be. I know I think about this quite often, and I'm the kind of person who kind of works from wherever I happen to be in any given time. So we're going to be chatting a little bit about kind of this tech ecosystem that's really needed from corporate companies to their employees, so that people feel secure working wherever you happen to be. And as we know, kind of the next many months is a little bit uncertain in where we're going to be working, how we're going to be working, if we're going back to the office, if we keep having to work from home. So knowing that you are secure and that the building can still communicate with you is really, really important. So I think over the last few weeks, we've seen a lot of buildings that do have tenant engagement platforms, where maybe they used to think that it's kind of not really that necessary, or it's a nice to have, but not a necessity. We've seen a lot of those companies really succeed with communicating with their tenants because they have this streamlined way of communicating with people, right? And usually it's an app on their phone. So if you belong to that building, you're using a tenant engagement app to connect with the building, the amenities, your colleagues. And so even right now in this kind of time of uncertainty where people are, you can't rely just on an email to send to somebody, that may communicate that out to the rest of their team or not from the building. We've seen a lot of uptick in use of tenant engagement apps to communicate value, important information, offer amenities, whether it's kind of fitness services, events, social activities, happy hours, whatever it happens to be. And so Join is definitely kind of one of those pieces, and maybe an underlying piece of the overall tech stack and ecosystem that folks are kind of having to adopt. Again, being able to try to work from wherever they are in a secure and healthy way. Let's see if we can add Charles back. And guys, I see a lot of you on here. Ask us your questions. This segment is going to be all about kind of coming back to work. These guys are there to help kind of handhold people into this next wavelength of whatever work looks like for all of us, what we're ushering in. So let us know any questions you might have or stuff you're thinking about. When Charles does come back on, he's going to be, able to answer some of those questions. In the meantime, let's check out some of these graphics that we have. And again, we'll try to make these available in the comments or on DisruptCRE.com. Those of you who are asking about previous episodes of DisruptCRE Weekly, those are all in the playlist called DisruptCRE Weekly on the DisruptCRE YouTube channel. So you are welcome to rewatch, refer back, and check those out. And I'm glad that session last week was really resonated with you guys. So I'm gonna grab Charles back in our stream. Here he comes. There he is.
Hi.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. If it was Zoom, I would know how to reset the audio, but
no worries.
I only knew to reboot in this case, so I don't know what happened. We did our test yesterday, and I was on the call for an hour listening.
I know, we chatted for an hour.
It was all very good. I'm so sorry.
Just setting up our conversation, letting everybody know a little bit about what you guys do, but it would be really helpful if you could introduce yourself and talk to us a little bit about what you do with Join. I know we met before this all started happening, and I can imagine things have changed. So talk to us a little bit about that change as well.
Yeah, so I've been in the tech industry my whole life. I started in McKinsey as a tech person. I was a partner at McKinsey in Texas and did a lot of work with tech companies there. And then I did a startup, and then I was at Cisco for about 17 years and did lots of different things, telepresence, a whole bunch of pay TV, really interesting cloud DVR I built with some leading companies. And then I got into virtualizing networking. And I worked on virtual managed services, helping basically create network as a service with Cisco, working with some of the biggest service providers and cloud companies. And then I left Cisco to become an entrepreneur. And one of the stages in becoming an entrepreneur is to be an angel investor. And I invested in Join as one of my portfolio companies.
Very cool.
Very small scale angel, right? But they were one of the ones I was very interested in. And then I went off and worked on another series of startups, and then we're working with an incubator. And Join had by then become venture funded, went from seed to venture stage. And I was talking with the CEO, Carl, and decided I would come on and join the company as the CMO. And that was just this last January. So I've been watching it since the beginning. Thank you. And then but now I've come on as the CMO, and I'm also responsible for product direction, which is what I did at Cisco for years. I was really a product person. And so that's where I came from. And what I do now is really trying to drive Join's growth. And of course, we just came into an incredible once in a lifetime, hopefully, experience in a couple months in to this, which, we always heard people talk about when they would list things that could happen. They would list pandemic sort of at the end of the list, but none of us really paid attention, right? You'd say, there could be a war, they could be or a pandemic. Oh, sure. Yeah, I've seen that in the movies, but anyway.
But likely. Right. So tell us about traditionally what Join's value prop is to the commercial real estate industry, and then how it's changed to suit needs right now. Because you guys have done you're one of the few who's done an exceptional job of pivoting to offer real value. And I know you guys are doing it for free, which is crazy and amazing. So talk to us about it.
Yeah. So Join's proposition, even from when I first invested, was let's turn networking that people do, say enterprise networking, which means the connectivity as well as all the boxes, routers and switches and security devices, all that. Let's turn that into a service. I mean, why not? That's what's happened in compute. Data center as a service is what we call cloud. So why has that not happened in networking? And as I said, I was doing that before with Cisco for a company that needs to sell boxes. Okay, well, what if you had a company that didn't need to sell boxes and just wanted to help companies get everything they need from connectivity very securely as a service? So that's what we were doing, working with big real estate companies was the market we went after, and said, let's help you create network as a service for your flex space. You were just talking with Justin about flexible spaces and all the technology needs there. What if that was just a turnkey service, but also spec suites and connecting building systems to that same network as a service?
And is that I know it benefits both the landlord and the tenant when you can do that, but is that so primarily tenants don't have to feel like they're responsible for figuring out what service to use, if it's secure, how to make sure everyone has homogeneous, steady, reliable connectivity?
That's exactly right. So when the workers come in today in a digital native, cloud native workforce, they expect to pop open their laptop and there's Wi-Fi. And give me an SSID, right? We've been all over the world, and every restaurant, you walk in and you say, in whatever language, you just say, do you have Wi-Fi? And they know what to tell you, right? So that's the same thing when you go into workspace, I need Wi-Fi. Well, if you're a company, you care if that's a secure connection, and you care about that being reliable. And so you would need to sort of buy some boxes and some subscriptions to software and some subscription to security services in order to provide that to your employees. Well, what if you didn't? What if that was just a service provided by either your employer, as you're used to in a big company, but in a flex space, the employers are small and they're coming and going and shrinking. Right. What if that was provided by the real estate? That was the idea. What if that's now people are saying fourth utility? What if that was just a utility provided as part of the part of your workspace? I think
that's like an expected normal now, right? Just based on generally, I think a lot of it has to do with that WeWork culture where people walked in, it worked, it was, you're supposed to rely on it. And that's that. And so when you move into a normal office, you kind of expect a similar experience.
That's right. And so we had really good traction. That's how we went from being a seed company to an A and A+ round venture funded companies. We had good traction providing that to real estate owners. Let's be your network as a service as part of your flexible work offering. And then they started saying, hey, we could connect some building systems to this. And we were just starting to make a push to say, you've put this backbone in place, basically. And by the way, one of the things we do is we bring in optical. So there's tons of really low latency bandwidth, right? Just what if bandwidth wasn't scarce? What if it was plentiful, right? That's, again, back to the clouds. When you go to Amazon, you don't say, I hope they have enough computers, right? No, it's plenty. We have infinite. Doesn't matter. If you need more, we have more. So what if we did that with bandwidth? So we have these, it's not megabits. It's not gigabit. Terabits worth of bandwidth available to you. Okay, so that's not a constraint. But I need to optimize it so it's really fast for video and it can be slower for internet. Well, it's just fast for everything. It's low latency, tons of make that, and so that's kind of how we start, by unconstraining the resource.
Yeah.
We said, okay, but then we've built that up through your building and enabled, say, the floor where your flexible space is. And now you want to add some new IoT to the building operation. Why not hang it off of that same network? Because that network runs down the building through optical to our little point, we call it an edge cloud. And that's where we're applying all the security. So no one can attack you from the outside. We're doing all the virus, all the malware. You think of firewall stuff is all happening sort of a few blocks down from where that building and other buildings are. So if you hang something on that, it's also safe from attack. You don't have to go build a whole network and a whole security stack for each new system that you're putting in, because if you hang it on this network, it's secure from the outside. It's got all the speed and latency. And then the way we do networking, again, you could say, well, do I want plain networking where everybody's just in one network, or do I want to slice it up? You may have heard in 5G about this network slices. Do I create little slices, so different slice for the elevator system than for the Wi-Fi? And the answer is yes, we just do that automatically too. That's not an upgrade. We just automatically create these separate virtual networks for each. So if you want to hang a new system on,
do that? For those people who don't know, they're not, many people are not familiar with 5G, with exception of just having heard that maybe it's a capability coming down the pipe at some point. But why is that important? Why is that a thing that we have to even think about?
Well, one of the things the 5G industry is trying to do is explain how you should use 5G for business applications, not just for using your cell phone.
Sure, which is probably the more tangible reason to have 5G, right?
Yeah,
to be totally honest. As individuals, we really don't need 5G.
I would say we probably don't need. I've been in the tech industry long enough now. Someone may think of a reason why we need it. Someone come up with applications.
Yeah, you might think of a reason.
But in general, we are pretty happy with if we have LTE. If you have a good signal, you're pretty much set. Right. So they're saying, okay, what else could we do? Well, we could do self-driving cars, let's say, as an example. And they said we could do building systems, we could do other things. But of course, what they say is that, well, let's say you have a self-driving car on a given radio, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of consumers come on and start doing Facebook broadcasting. Well, you don't want to flood the bandwidth and disconnect the car. Right? So they had to sort of say, oh, we're going to create these slices. So the car slice will be totally set, protected bandwidth, protected quality of service, so that if a whole bunch of people come on their cell phones and start doing Facebook broadcasting, it won't eat into the bandwidth and it won't interrupt the car. So that was the idea of creating these protected slices or lanes of bandwidth. Well, it turns out we've known how to do that in network for a long time. I mentioned I worked on telepresence at Cisco, and we did that for telepresence to protect those signals. And so again, in networking world, you could pay a lot of money for that kind of service and pay a whole bunch of experts to set it up and configure your network for. But again, just like we did with bandwidth, in Join's case, we said, why don't we just make that the way we do everything? So you always get lots of bandwidth, you always get low latency, you always get high security, you always get slicing. So
each system has its own kind of dedicated bandwidth, if you will, or dedicated aspect of that system, so that it's never lagging, it's never competing with each other. And I think it's a really interesting point just generally about IoT, and the term IoT is thrown around a lot in especially commercial real estate, but just in the greater technology industry overall. It's this notion of buildings having more and more systems that are connecting to each other, talking to each other, feeding information back and forth. And that's super, super important so that we can continue to create better experiences. We can be more intuitive to the users, especially now coming back to work, having, knowing and having the elevator show up when somebody needs it, having the HVAC function as necessary, the air filtration system, whatever it happens to be. But naturally, every time you assume a new technology, you add some new technology to your tech stack, whether it's a building or your personal or whatever, you're always adding a new vulnerability. And so it's super cool. And we know that there will be more and more devices that come online, especially as we're trying to come back to work and we have to monitor how many people and densification, and we need these systems to alert us when there's, too much densification, too many people in a conference room or in an office. So, or when something needs to be cleaned, right? And so I think it's incredibly important to have that foundation of trust and security that you guys are bringing to the table. I want you to talk to our audience a little bit about how you guys have translated this in building security and kind of underlying foundation of a tech stack into how people can use it at home, and what it's doing for people right now.
So the conversation you had about IoT was where we were when I came in, sort of pre-COVID. We sort of succeeded and we got real traction on the flex spaces, and now we got this backbone. Let's talk to you about connecting IoT systems. And as you said, every time you connect a new one, don't build a whole new network and a whole new set of security vulnerabilities. By the way, it's not just cyber attack. Each system, if it has its own network, has techs coming into the building who are going into the wiring closet next to other people's tech, right? So all those parallel stacks create cyber and physical security risk. Okay, so COVID hits. What happens is we go in what I call digital and fast forward. So one of the very first things, we didn't think of it as fast forward, but everyone's home. I'm home, you're home. And we realized we can, and now we have, create a VPN service so that we can't really affect the bandwidth in your home like I was talking about in the building. I can't give you infinite bandwidth at your house. But you probably have pretty good bandwidth at your house. So what I can do...
We're live streaming. That's not too bad.
So what I can do, though, is give you the slice idea. I can give you technology that really easy lets you create a tunnel. Can't protect the bandwidth of the tunnel, but I can give you the ability to, with just software, create an encrypted tunnel that comes to one of our points of presence that we already build, and from there out to the internet. That way, anyone attacking you can't see you. They see our firewall, not you. They don't see your home address and all that.
Nothing about.
And then your tunnel between us and your home is encrypted tunnel, so they can't get in and see it. So that's the first thing we did, and said, okay, for our Flex users, now they're home, they can now be secured using VPN to their office resource. And we decided to make that available to anyone in the industry, right? It costs us very little to offer that. And so we just said anyone, and including on this call, anybody who wants to just use the VPN, we're not going to charge you. There's no strings attached. You can just use it.
That's
and
incredible.
It's a software install. So just, come to our website and ask for it, and we'll.
Okay, so we'll put that resource also in the comments for anybody who's watching. We'll make sure you guys have access to find that. That's incredible. That's fantastic.
Right.
Thank you so much to you guys and the whole team, Carl, everyone, Rachel. Thank you guys. Really.
Yeah. So that was our first reaction was, hey, this is a massive disruption. Let's see if we can be helpful.
Yeah.
We have these technical capabilities and these points of presence that we can bring people to the internet and protect them, right? Because by the way, the cyber and phishing attacks just went crazy in the first few weeks of COVID.
It was insane. I mean, I think it was interesting to see a lot of offices not close kind of in the first wave of expected kind of work from home mandates because of their lack of VPN bandwidth, lack of security. They didn't want to send people home and say work from home because it was insecure, it was vulnerable. And I understand, I mean, we all kind of the risk of that.
Yeah.
Tremendous issue.
Right. And everybody woke up, including Zoom, had to wake up to what does security really mean. But for us, that was only kind of the start of this digital on fast forward. The next thing that we realized is, and you heard Justin talking a lot about this, which is when people do come back, or even when they're home, we'd kind of like to know more about what's going on. We'd like data.
Right.
We'd like to understand how many people are logging on, how many people are in the building, and when they come back, how many people will be in the building. And it turns out the network is a pretty good sensor. And it's funny because I've been in, as I said, tech for a long time. And in the tech world, whether you're building applications or networks, you measure everything. They just create metrics like crazy. And you've heard of things like Prometheus and InfluxDB, where people just gathering huge amounts of data, big data, right? But they're measuring the actual technology. What sort of everyone's come to, and Justin a long time ago, is I'd kind of like to know about the people in the space.
Right.
I mean, if you're building the technology, it's kind of a data center question, but if you're in the end user space, the physical space, we'd like to know. So we've sort of figured out, hey, the network is a pretty effective sensor, and we're already providing our customers with sort of visibility. How many people are coming into your building? And then with appropriate privacy protection, because people log on, We can even say which company or even which person, right? But we're subject to the California Privacy Protection Act, of course.
Right.
And this is going to be a huge arena for the next months, as often happens. We sort of, well, we saw it after 9/11, civil liberties take a back seat to public safety, and then we have to try to recover. Right. So.
Sure. It's been very interesting already to watch, and I think there is a lot of concern from a privacy standpoint, not only coming back into buildings, but just generally as humans. There's so much that, like you said, from a public safety standpoint, whether it's the government or the local municipality or whoever it is, trying to understand movement of people. I mean, I know here in New York City, a big problem for back to work strategy and reentry strategy is transportation. And how do you kind of visualize how people are going to get to places? So I think we know the value of seeing and identifying specifically how many people are
mostly how many people,
where they are,
where they are, right? It's location and numbers.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting from a safety and health standpoint, knowing, okay, there were X number of people in this particular public space. We know that every day there's a density of population in this space specifically, right? At this time. And then it falls off after lunch, or, people go to meetings or whatever it is. And so we can be also better equipped to re-enter those buildings, having known that those are, identify the hot spots of where people gather historically, and now coming back. And so you guys are using kind of connectivity as this sensor to identify these trends and have these insights. Is that because people are connecting to the Wi-Fi and therefore you're able to see where they are, who they are?
Yeah, that's right. And right. So most people have two devices on them. And if they're really sitting down to work, then they have two. When they're coming and going, they have one. And some people have their Wi-Fi off and their Bluetooth off. But what happens, most people have, especially you probably have too, is you upgrade your phone, you realize that battery lasts just fine for a couple of days even.
Right.
I don't have to turn the Wi-Fi off. And because we all have, I had them on earlier, but the wireless headset, and I got my Apple Watch, I have the Bluetooth on all the time.
Right.
And so as our endpoints can see, even if you're not logged on, can see that there's somebody emitting a Wi-Fi and or a Bluetooth signal. So we sort of can see numbers as people come in and out. And again, if they log on, we can correlate who they are. And you say, again, privacy problems, but there's an upside to that if we manage it well, which is communicating. You talked about this commuting problem.
Yeah.
And we're working with partners who have the same demand right now, which is, if we know what we want to happen and we can see what's happening, what if we communicated with people? And so sometimes I'll talk to people think about a disruptive application like Uber or Lyft. It's not just big data. It's not just automation. There's also communication. And even sometimes, you actually talk direct to the driver, but you're definitely talking to the application. Application talks to the driver. Application talks to the person. So I think this is what we're starting to see happen in a building, which is, today we have company A that's going to have more people in. So let's ask company B if they can keep more people at home. Right. And the same thing with maybe the first demand that we're actually seeing is on access, which is we need to communicate with the people who are arriving to stretch out the arrival time. Because normally a building gets occupied in about the 40 minutes. That's the peak time. That's sort of 40 minutes when everybody comes. And right now they need to stretch that out to about an hour and a half in order to match the elevator capacity. So how do you do that? You could have them all queue up. Even better if you could communicate with people, right? You come a little later, you come a little earlier. And that's just being worked out. But that's an example of digital on fast forward, which is from something we didn't even know to look at, we can now see, and what if we go beyond seeing and communicate and coordinate, right? And that's what technology lets you do.
Yeah.
If you go there. So that's one of the next things beyond working at home is, okay, we're going to re-enter. We'd like more information. And they'll use that information.
Yeah. I know we've been talking a lot about flexible space. It's actually so interesting how much of a topic it's become. And I think I think, WeWork being in the headlines so much doesn't help that cause, or maybe it does because we're talking more
it
about
makes it clear, yeah.
Right. But so we have a question from Rachel. Hi, can you talk about how Join can help owners who are thinking about creating their own flex space like Boxer property, which we know some are more inclined to do it themselves, some want to outsource, but I have a feeling more and more will be looking to do it themselves so that they can control kind of the environment, as we really do need to have that,
yeah, for sure. Well, and these two things we just talked about combined to that. So people working at home, what's happened is, and at first we didn't believe it, as we heard more and more surveys, people are planning to stay at home. Is it because they like it or because their employer realized it's efficient? Whatever. It's mixed. It's happening, right? So people are saying we're going to keep certain workforces at home indefinitely until, or maybe forever. Okay. Right. Well, what does that mean? That means less occupants in the building. Then you have the WeWork discussion, and we can see in the news, oh, they're maybe not doing as well. There's gonna be potentially Swiss cheese in our lease portfolio because the WeWorks of the world may be reducing or disappearing or some combination.
Right now, they're still like the largest single tenant in New York City and London, right? It's crazy. What are these markets going to look like?
Yeah.
That's a different conversation altogether.
Right. So we say, well, and their company, the types of tenants they have, individual companies, very small companies, are A, most likely to stay home, and B, going to have a hard time in this economy, right? If they're very, very fragile. Right. So whatever happens, companies are saying, okay, but I'm going to have leasing will become important again, right? It's not just I have a building and it'll fill up.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what's the best way to fill a building? And I thought Justin gave a really great example of that, which is you put in a flex space, and that flex space is something you can market, and you can market. He was talking about marketing the different slices, the same space you can market in different shapes and sizes, because that's a way to catch the most new tenants. But at the same time, by the way, and we've seen it with the spaces we've done, those tenants can grow and occupy other space. But also that flex space is available to existing tenants for overflow or for someone who treats it as a spec suite. So we have been doing this before. So what we were doing before COVID that now applies again, where you've been helping companies build flexible spaces as turnkey. Yes, we can help owners do that. And we're quite engaged with a number of owners on, okay, we're going to either increase or start a flexible offering in our space to do this, because we know that's the way to reprime the pump of leasing, and having it have high bandwidth, really great security, direct connect cloud access is another thing we offer. So you never go over the internet, just go straight to the cloud. These are the kind of things that growth, right? Digital and fast forward includes the tech industry will be doing better, and more things will be tech. And so if you want to attract the tenants in the growth part of the industry, even if they're drug researchers, you think the drug researchers is all beakers, right? It's mostly big data analysis, right?
Well, it's also like place matters so much, right? It's no longer, if you maybe used to work in, New York City, now you're sitting at home on Long Island or in Westchester or in a suburb, and, you need to work where your life can be conducive to having a dedicated workspace. It may not be commuting back to the city, or it may not be, in the same style that it used to happen. And I also think that many large corporate companies are used to taking a surplus of space in the anticipation of growth. Which, do they usually use that space? Does it make sense? Maybe, maybe not, but that's all going to go away as people are looking to buckle down and save on costs. And so how do they still provide something to their employees that is suitable for their needs? And so this is kind of, I think, how it will manifest more and more over your traditional model. It just makes more sense.
Yeah, well, and people have been talking the last few weeks, is this hub and spoke, I heard someone call it yesterday, this satellite office model, is that a reality? And I've heard very, very large companies here in the tech industry talk about that's what they're planning to do. On the other hand, to your point, they're not sure if it's right. Now, Of course, they're planning on it, because if they're planning to keep people at home, that's the ultimate satellite model, right? Everybody's in their own orbit. As we were talking about last hour, well, people want to be together. Okay, but are the teams naturally going to aggregate in the right suburbs? Nobody knows. we think so, but that just emphasizes that's why a flexible offering is so much more attractive, because neither the owner nor the occupier is going to enter into a long-term relationship on this basis, right? We're experimenting, right?
And also just in this current climate, who knows what will happen in a year from now? Who knows if we'll need to, have some of these precautions and public safety kind of things that we're implementing. Maybe they will go away, hopefully by this time next year, right? We might not need those things. So the flex space option gives people exactly that flexibility.
Yeah, flexibility. So, and one of the key things, flexibility, is just shortening the commitment time. And I just make a comment about what happened in the software industry over the course of my career. Was we ended up with this thing called Agile. Why did we go to Agile? Agile is sort of these, let's call it 2 weeks sprints, and you plan them out, but still you adjust on the fly, even in the sprint. Why did we do that? Because what happened in software is we went permanently on fast forward. Things were always changing. We always had uncertainty. People would tell you, this is exactly what I want in my software. And when you showed it to them, they said, I hate that. It's like, I absolutely don't want that, right? But a week ago, you told me, now you have to take it. No. And so the software industry and then the cloud really enabled the same thing. I need to start a new software team. Oh, let's get IT. In 6 months from now, we'll have a data center ready so you can start building software. Forget that. I'm going to Amazon this afternoon, in the next minute, and I'm going to start writing code.
Absolutely.
So this flexibility, a lot of it was sort of the length of commitment. The duration of commitment gets short. And so we're using the same word here when we say flexible, is I need shorter term commitments because that makes me more agile, which I think the real estate word today is resilient, which has more to it than agile.
Across the board, is a good word. Yeah. Our industry or not.
Yeah. So it's an approach whose time is now more than ever, but it may well be that we stay on fast forward, right? That may be just
nobody wants to spend, wasted dollars on office space. And so you can't take a commitment, beyond kind of what we know and what we can say for sure, which is very little right now. And I it is interesting to talk about kind of people coming back together in collaboration, physically in person and on teams. I think that's a luxury. I think that's nice to have that for right now. We kind of have to do without, but the push for flex space is just to have a dedicated space outside of your home to go work, right? And separating just even, psychologically and emotionally and mental, all of those components physically, right? Moving yourself from your home to have a place of productivity and clarity and all of those things. So I hope that one day soon we can come back together physically in person for collaborating and working. But
well, if the software industry, if we use that, where they're under this constant pressure, they do still value co-location. So even after even everything's digital and we have, remember the sticky notes that people use to do their agile, that's all been digitized. Teams are still more productive together. So I think,
yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I think that we'll find a way to come back together, but lots of experimentation during this next, I don't know how, that's the thing. We don't know how long, just more uncertainty.
We don't know. And depending on where you are, it's a totally different landscape. Like we just heard from Justin, a lot of things are even starting to open back up in Texas and around Houston where he is. But here in New York City, I'm looking outside and, there's not a person to even be seen. And it looks, it seems like maybe even kind of a tunnel deep into the summer and into the fall. And who knows? There's no real information.
Yeah, we don't know. And so, as people are starting to reoccupy, then we've seen the next thing that's coming along is that on the fast forward is people are going to attach new solutions to the network.
Yeah.
So the one that got everyone's attention right away is they're going to put a temperature sensor. I don't like to call it a gun, but that's what it looks. I always cringe when I see them put
Is that what it looks like?
When you watch videos of it, it's quite disturbing. You walk into a building and someone walks up and does this, and
oh, that's interesting. That really is it like an in-person, somebody has to come like take your temperature, like
right up to your face. Yeah, they have more sophisticated systems, and you've seen them in the airports in Japan and stuff in the past. Yeah. But the quick and simple one is this gun that they sort of put right.
Wow.
In the head. Anyway, let's leave that. Leave the imagery aside for a moment. But the same thing. What do you connect that to, and how do you protect the data? But then you have people are going to put other systems in, which is I want to be able to contact trace. So I need better logging of who came in and out of the building and which floors they went to. Touchless systems are just new systems that are going to go in. So we just think there's going to, again, IoT is going to go on fast forward. So that's what I'm trying to get to is IoT was sort of felt a little bit like the technology industry pushing it on people, and it was slowly coming there. Elevators, when it was time to upgrade a system, you would go to a smart system.
Right.
Okay, well, now you're saying, well, I am going to have more of those. Yeah. And we talked about the visibility of what's going on in the whole building. You start and we're hearing our owners talk about this. I'd like a smart building, not just a bunch of smart systems.
Smart systems, yeah, because you also can't homogenize any sort of data from those systems when it's all coming in separately, and it doesn't have the effect. The idea of IoT is to have that building be intuitive to who's there, and it's more important right now than ever. So if you have all these fragmented systems, it's not working in orchestra as it's intended.
Yeah, well, and a cloud person would say, well, if each system grabs its data. And by the way it works there, I'd adopt a system, build a network, build its security. So that takes a while. And we're trying to say, don't do that, right? Just plug into a platform. But they say, okay, fine. But then I'll just take the data through my system and back to my database, and I'll create an API where you can come and query my system and then dig the data out for the building and the time and place that you need. Right, you're getting tired from my story because that's complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated.
It's possible.
And most people don't even have the context for all of those steps that are needed to implement systems effectively in this way, which is why I think hopefully you're coming to talk to you guys. But
well, that's right, because that's all possible. Yes, it's possible to go put everything in the cloud and then go fish it out again with the right queries, and that'll happen. But it makes more sense to say, well, why don't we aggregate it locally? We can apply privacy locally and share it to the cloud. But then we also already have we have our building specific instance of that data already. We don't have to go tease it back out of the cloud. So that's sort of that two-step. Lots of new IoT coming. Let's make it easy to plug in, easy to secure. But also, as that gathers data, why don't we locally aggregate that data so that we can act on it? Like, that part of the building is empty. That company hasn't come back. Let's adjust the security access, the HVAC and other things appropriately from what we're seeing. So, and then the last part of that comes up, I've been alluding to it, is, if I'm doing all that, I'm a building owner, let's say, I've got a lot of compliance stuff to deal with. I've drifted into HIPAA. So I've certainly gathered a whole bunch of personal data that CCPA or other regulations apply. I certainly want to maintain goodwill with. Well,
it's interesting. This is interesting, right? Privacy is such an interesting topic now because it's, we talk about it a lot on the building level in our industry and conversations we have. But I think as individuals become more aware that not only municipalities, but down to the building level, down to our phone level, there's more and more information for public safety that's being gathered about us. And how is it being used? I mean, I know in San Francisco, they've banned facial recognition technology. It's something that, if you look at China, you are subjected to facial recognition technology.
That's society works.
How it goes. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting just culturally, those differences, because we value that so much to the point where people stood up and said, no, we're not having facial recognition technology. But now if you want to enter a public space, there's an assumed kind of risk of, being publicly available with your information, with your face, maybe it's your thumbprint that now opens up the building. And we talk about biometrics a lot in the past, which I think will kind of start coming more and more to the front of the priority list. But I don't know. We can't assume anymore kind of what our right to privacy is in today's climate as individuals.
Well, and the way I observe it is, it's been caveat emptor. Right. One of my favorite subjects in business school was business history. And during the Gilded Age, you had caveat emptor, which is, hey, we're shipping candy and it's killing children, but the guys who ship it will get in trouble and go out of business. So it's all good. Right. It's like, no, then we came up with food safety. It's like, let's not kill the children in the first place. Right. Right. That's what happened 100 years ago. Right. So now you kind of have that with data, which is, hey, we got your data. Too bad for you. We're going to use it however we want. We got it. You should be careful about not giving us to it because we have it.
Right. It's on us as the individual.
Yeah, that's the caveat emptor approach. And I believe what will happen in CCPA and certainly what they've done in Europe, but I think COVID will put this on fast forward, is we expect responsible chain of custody with our data. We expect if you gather it, that you're professionally protecting it from data loss, that we can, like the regulations say, I can know what you have and I can ask you to delete it. You have to tell me if you're selling it to somebody else, et cetera. And so, So the reason I'm bringing this up with respect to join is, again, if you mentioned about doing disparate systems, you create cybersecurity risk. You also create this compliance mess. If it's all just being done this way and that way, then how do you know that you're doing a proper chain of custody? So again, it makes sense to sort of aggregate, do things in a professional way, build a platform. You plug systems into that platform from a connect. But the same thing, if those systems are build a platform where we gather the data, we treat it all in a consistent way. And as we learn better and better to be good custodians of that data, all the data gets that treatment. So we think that's on fast forward as well for the building industry.
I would tend to agree. I hope so. I actually have a couple of images that I had shared earlier. I'm going to make this a little bit larger so people can see. Just kind of outlining a little bit of what you have been chatting about. Any of these that you want to kind of specifically?
Yeah. So on the one with the building, that on the left side is kind of okay. Let's have one building backbone, and then you can hang lots of systems off of it. Right now, the health and safety systems are going to drive the need to be able to do something consistently. And then instead of each of those having a network, what we say is bring them to the same network and to an edge of cloud where you can aggregate, you can anonymize, you can be compliance, you can have compliance, and then you can do data and analysis on that as appropriate. And then that data is protected with sophisticated security from attack from the internet, but it's also a point of very broadband access to the internet or directly to the cloud. And so we think this is the way you bring a cloud model to the building industry. And this is exactly what we do. And as I said, we started up at that flex layer, but now, it's really the whole building. So that's one, when we say we're bringing a cloud model, that's kind of our picture of doing it. And then the other one they were showing was,
let's go back to that guy.
This is what we're hearing, how people are thinking about reoccupying their building, which is, we need to think about the access, and then we need to think about tracing, which starts with not so much, the did you have COVID or didn't you have COVID might be something that Google and Apple do for us. Did you were you with someone who had, right, that sort of tracing? But definitely who's been in the building and what places are being utilized, and can I provide that information back to the right occupants and authorities in a consistent way, right? And if you don't manage that professionally, it's going to be a constant source of friction of what did you gather my data and what did you do with it, et cetera. And then being able to comply with that. And what you'll hear from the building owners, they may not say compliance, they might say liability, but I called it compliance here. But the basic idea is, in order to reoccupy my building, right? What does I care about? My care about is I want to reoccupy the building safely and all that. But I ended up doing this access and new systems and tracing. Well, now I've exposed myself to new liabilities, either by not doing it. Either if I don't put those systems in, I'm liable for not creating safety. But in creating safety, I've created new liabilities of gathering a whole bunch of data. So our basic point is, well, we know how to do cybersecurity and data loss prevention. That's technology capability. But if you do it, as we said, if you just sort of do it little by little here and there, you're probably not going to get the outcome you want. So
Well, and
So
also you
that,
guys are enabling all of these kind of new capabilities. It's not just kind of return to work safely, feel secure about the network, but you guys, because of that, because as we're entering the workplace, and they've implemented some of these things for safety reasons, it unleashes and unlocks all of this new potential, new capability, which could be part of helping instill confidence and kind of recommitment from the landlords to the tenants of, we're considering your experience as you're coming back to work beyond just like the basics of secure.
Yeah, that's right. And of course we've seen it in the grocery stores, and now you're seeing it in some of the real estate. You can put tape on the floor and say, stand here.
We've seen that. Yeah, we have seen that here in New York.
Right, stand here, walk this way. Right.
Here's
where to stand, and here's where to flow.
High-tech wayfinding.
and that's okay. That's how we get started.
Yeah.
But if you go back to 9/11, when we just put a bunch of new security procedures in, all we got was a huge queue, and that's what's happening already. You can see if you just do tape on the floor, you just get a queue, right? You move the crowd outside onto the sidewalk or whatever, right? And so you say that's where people want to go. Okay, that may be a way to start, and it's okay because only some people will come back. But if you try to up the, raise the number of people coming back, then you say, we need data. We talked about that. I need ways to communicate with employers and tenants.
Right.
And I want to instill confidence about this area has been cleaned. This, when was the last time this was cleaned? The data, we've increased the airflow. So communicating, being able to control those things and communicate, all of that will be better with technology than just the tape on the floor solutions.
And it's interesting because when we were transitioning to add you to the stream, I was mentioning to folks that you guys are part of an ecosystem, a tech stack ultimately that needs to be there so that people can work, whether it's in the building, it's in the interim working from home, it's somewhere in between that.
In a flex space somewhere, yep.
Flex space somewhere. So you guys are one of the technologies in that ecosystem, but pairing really nicely with tenant engagement. And tenant engagement is something we've seen on the rise, something that maybe people felt like originally was maybe a nice to have. They weren't positive if it was something they needed on their, as a line item on their budget. Where is it, whose budget is it coming from? It's not tenant improvement, right? All of those kinds of questions. But now we've really seen it come into place as it's a lifeline. It's a lifeline for building owners to communicate to tenants beyond just the email that they have on file. And who knows if that person is still working at that company even. So are they the one responsible to then translating that message back to the, all of the employees that are not just now sitting in one office and it's an easy communication, but they have to then go find their employees and make sure that everyone has the right information. So
I agree. Tenant engagement is one of the key technologies.
It's interesting how
partner of ours, a companion or a partner in the ecosystem of us is the tenant engagement systems. And again, you go back a few months, you go back to February, and we say tenant experience was okay. Yes, we want to have a nice, lovely building, and we want to have good Wi-Fi, but really, our buildings are full and we're pretty good. Okay. Well, now, again, in order to get the buildings full again, even the people who kept their leases, to get them to come back, let alone attract new, all of a sudden, making it safe and being able to communicate and engage is part of the building making money. It's not just kind of a nice adornment, right? So.
Big part. Yeah. I think one of the biggest struggles right now is communicating, plans of safety, just any plan of action, but instilling that confidence in employees and just general humans. I mean, just thinking even about being in a retail store or being walking down and being in Times Square or just Central Park or wherever it is, you need to instill confidence in people, and communication is the number one kind of vehicle. And so, I think that a lot of your Class A office buildings around the country have implemented some form of communication beyond just work order, forms. But it is interesting having seen that specific tenant engagement technology go from a nice to have to a necessity, a lifeline. So you guys with Join laying that foundational, infrastructure for safety from a connectivity and cybersecurity and workforce standpoint, and then partnering with those folks in the rest of the ecosystem is a powerful thing if you're one of those owners that have have taken that initiative. I want to ask you one last final question to leave everyone off on this Friday, which is talk to us about something that you are excited to see kind of happen as we're re-entering into the world, or just generally in the future. Could be from a technology standpoint, could be from an industry standpoint, could just be a human standpoint. I know it's a loaded question.
No, I think I mentioned earlier this idea using Lyft or Uber as an example of communicating.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I went to this over my career. As people imagine technology, they always imagine that automation is machines taking over, and the machines talk to the machines, and the machines take care of everything.
Which is,
well, that just leaves us to talk and shop, right? That's what we could do. But what tends to happen is, and we saw this in the early days of the internet. Oh, the internet will be all about machine-to-machine communication. And what people used the internet for was to communicate. Right? So it invented all kinds of new ways, the web and everything that's happened since, to communicate. And so I think we've seen it here where we are all isolated at home. Well, in some way, we're talking to more people in a broader ecosystem than we were before. Maybe not as often to the guys that's next to you at the office, but to a broader set of people. And I think the same is true in the industry, that we were coming together at conferences where we would take turns sort of talking at the audience. And now I see, just like we just saw with me watching Justin, we're more interested in what each other are doing. But then we take it forward to what's happening now. Well, I never listened to what my governor said very much, but now I do.
Definitely not every day. Maybe
I listen to what your governor says now too.
Yeah, right. You're right. Exactly. Right.
But I think the same thing with inside the building, that this idea that the building is sort of blind, this monolith. There's a guard who sort of takes your ID, and that's it. That's all the communication that goes on.
Right.
But instead, the building, the workplace, also we communicate with each other. And we need to in order to coordinate the COVID return. But I think it actually represents this idea that technology isn't automation. Technology is sort of this it enhances the way we live, but it also enables us to communicate more effectively. We have more data, so we're smarter when we communicate. I can see things, and we're more stimulated to talk about things, but then we still need to communicate in order to accomplish our job. But now we have all the automation making it better. So I think we'll see that in the building, as I said, that the building will be more responsive to us, not because it's out of magic, but because we can communicate to it and the owners and the operators, et cetera. And I think the same thing will be true in a retail store. You'll be able to, the retail store will be more responsive to you. They'll learn it because they're trying to manage density at first. But I think this will create, as we get on an online experience, we interact with it, that we'll get more interactive with our workspaces, with our retail spaces, et cetera. So what I found over my career is that actually makes things more fun, more engaging. The automation actually creates more human interaction than we expect. So that's what this, I think the silver lining here is, all this distancing is in fact creating more human interaction. So
I love that. I really appreciate that perspective so much. For those of you who are watching, my colleagues in our ARG group, I know Joan is going to be presenting and opening themselves up for some Q&A in that group as well. So I'll say thank you so much to Charles for sharing with us today. We'll share, like I said, some of the resources that they're offering in the comments, as well as the white paper and resources from Justin's segment earlier. Have a wonderful Friday to all of you guys, and we will see you next week.